Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into the Positive Head podcast, where you can always count on hearing fascinating discussions and interviews with the best and brightest consciousness change makers that are out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. And if you enjoy the Positive Head podcast, please be sure to follow us on iTunes by subscribing there, and also be sure to leave us a good review. In the podcast world, good reviews and subscribers on iTunes really are the holy grail. I mean, the more subscribers and good reviews you get, the more exposure you get. So if you love the show, or even just like it a little bit, please subscribe, give us a good review on iTunes. I assure you the support will be very much appreciated, and I'm confident the good karma gods will rain blessings down upon thee for doing so. Also, if you haven't been over to positivehead.com lately, we have some really cool new things going on. I'm super excited to announce the launch of our new line of t-shirts. Of course, we printed up the typical stuff you'd expect, you know, Positive Head tees with our super cool Flower of Life inspired logo, but we also have some very unique tees that have what we call chemistry quotes written out on them. Now, if you're wondering what the heck a chemistry quote is, well, I won't spoil the surprise, actually. You'll just have to go over to the site, check them out for yourself. Alrighty, everyone. On this week's podcast, I am very pleased to have Nick Polizzi here with me. Nick is the director of the fascinating documentary, The Sacred Science, that we're going to discuss in detail on this episode. Now, if you're one of the growing number of people that questions conventional medicine, I can safely say by the end of the show that questioning will probably grow stronger. But you're also going to hear a lot of reasons to be optimistic about alternative, natural, and holistic approaches to, healing common diseases and illnesses. Hello, Nick. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. I've been wanting to catch up with you for quite some time, and this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are, more and more people that are starting to really question the conventional approaches. And what you did here was really excellent to, take people through a whole process of seeing an alternative, holistic approach. And I guess we'll just start at the beginning. At the very start of this, the Sacred Science film, you said it was your quest to find a natural cure for a friend with Parkinson's disease that led you down this path. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've made three documentaries that are about alternative healing techniques. The first two are a little bit more clinical. They weren't like film festival material like the Sacred Science is, but they did cover natural methods for curing conventional illnesses. And about I want to say 6 years ago, a good friend of mine let me know that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And he was somebody who lives in, New York City. He's a pretty, meat and potatoes kind of guy. He doesn't like go to yoga, let's say. He works in Manhattan in construction, and he's just somebody who, respects what I do, but isn't somebody who's watching to see if they're eating too much gluten or if they're getting, the right amount of B12 in their diet. He's just somebody who, is a good friend of mine from a long time ago who doesn't necessarily, ascribe to the things that, I believe in. But he told me,
right.
And when he told me what he was going to do, and what the doctors had told him, it was just it was really frustrating because, this is, and if you have a family member or friend with Parkinson's, you probably know this. This is something that is not theory; it's fact. There is no cure or even extreme, long-term effective treatment for Parkinson's and using modern medicine. So that idea, really got to me. Just the idea that. Obviously I'm somebody who doesn't really put a lot of faith in modern medicine to begin with, but, this was something that really hit home for me that, I had a friend who was going to pretty much go under do everything he possibly could to stick to modern medicine and follow his doctor's instructions, but, was probably going to be let down in the long run because there was no way out. So that was sort of the impetus for, my research into Amazonian shamanism. And that started because, one of the first things I did was started just kind of opening up all the books I had and trying to figure out where there were any promising treatments for Parkinson. And, back in the 1920s, there was a drug that it's called banisterine that came out that was a natural herb that was being used to treat Parkinson's, and it looked like it was being used with some success. So, I had started researching what the heck was in banisterine, and banisterine is actually comprised of one of the compounds in the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, which is part of the ayahuasca vine, which I'm sure you probably know. So Banisteriopsis caapi and chacruna make ayahuasca, and we all know that ayahuasca is a South American shamanic visionary plant. So the rabbit hole kind of opened up from there. And I saw this banisterine. I started trying to figure out what was in it. It took me down to the Amazon. It blew open shamanism. And then when I went down there to start understanding it, then my entire life changed. And then what unfolded became the sacred science.
I think that's really fascinating. You weren't a guy who came to this, you kind of came through a different route. A lot of people end up exploring ayahuasca and things like that because they had a tendency to, explore psychedelics and LSD and other things, psilocybin mushrooms lead them to, oh, what's this ayahuasca? That's like the king of it all, right? Yeah. In your case, it came from a totally different viewpoint. Were you someone that had experimented at this point with any sort of psychedelic or plant medicines, up until this point?
Yes, I had. In college, I had worked with psilocybin before. I had actually been to Peru in my early 20s and had partaken in a San Pedro ceremony.
Okay.
That went totally wrong because the San Pedro wasn't brewed, the right way, and it turned into pretty much a turbo laxative and not a hallucinogen. So that was amazing. That was an amazing scene on the beach.
Sorry to laugh at your pain there. I'm just getting visuals of, you're expecting this amazing transformative experience, and instead you're just like having the runs in a beautiful landscape. Sorry, that's
exactly.
To laugh at your pain, but
Fine. And so I had, and honestly, before I had. It isn't like the only reason I went down to the jungle was because I was trying to trace the origins of this wonder drug from the early 1920s. I had worked with different plant medicines. I'm a pretty spiritual person. I got hit by lightning when I was 16, and it totally threw my world into a different place. And not saying I started being able to like float off the ground like powder or something like that, but I was I started having like out of body experiences and pretty intense things after that. So I've always been somebody who's very open to this this type of healing, but I hadn't had a reason to be immersed in it until I had started looking for a cure for Parkinson's disease.
Fascinating. Now, one of the things that it said right at the top of the film is 25% of drugs, and a lot of people may have heard this before, but I find it really fascinating. It kind of reiterated the point to me. 25% of drugs come from rainforest. What was it? It's something like 44,000 plants, and only 1% have been studied for medicinal value. So I thought that was a really fascinating point that, I think we've all kind of heard something about in the past, but it really, hearing the exact statistics again, just drove home the point to me. Is like, we've got to save these rainforests. I mean, 25% of our drugs have come from some plant in the rainforest, and you've got only 1% of that's even been studied. What are we doing burning this stuff down or cutting it down? It's insane.
I know. We could talk about that for hours. It's funny. In the film, we put 44,000 because I wanted to be conservative. I didn't want to obviously in this realm, there's plenty of people that are out there trying to make you look like you're making ludicrous claims. So one of our big things is we'd rather understate than overstate anything that we're finding, so that big mainstream media can't be like, look at these quacks, they got this stat wrong, and then dwell on that or something like that, and sort of undermine the entire movement, because it really is a movement. So 44,000 was very, very conservative. And, I'm surrounded by ethnobotanists now, have made many friends through the creation of this film. And a few of them, separate from one another, recently told me that our number of 44,000 is just, it's almost absurdly off. They're like, they're like, it's not, every year we're discovering more, they're not dwindling. I mean, there are plants that are going extinct every day, but the overall number of plants in the Amazon that haven't been studied is far more than 44,000. I think, my friend Ina she works in the New York City Botanical Garden. She said that it's closer to 65 or 70,000.
That's almost double.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's real. I mean, and there's, you could get all conspiracy theory on it and say, oh, Big Pharma doesn't want us to know about these plants. But I don't know that it's necessarily that dark. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm somebody who I can get sucked into conspiracy theory traps all the time. And I always end up just being like, I'd rather just focus on the solution than kind of, speculate as to these dark forces that are doing terrible things. But, I think it could be as simple as most of these medicines can't be extracted and synthesized into something that works. It's a whole plant, it's a whole plant remedy. And without the whole plant, you can't, the effects aren't nearly as strong. So for a pharmaceutical company, it doesn't make any sense to invest money in this because they can't patent it. You can't patent a living plant. Monsanto would love for that to change, and hopefully, in their biggest dreams, then they would be able to patent. You'd be able to patent any plant, but as of right now, you can't. So I think that it just doesn't make business sense for pharmaceutical companies, and modern science, who's funded largely by these organizations, to spend much time looking for plants, curative plants in the jungle, because there just isn't much money to be made from them.
That's a fascinating point, in a really sad point, and it speaks. A lot of these things are tangents that we could probably go down for hours. In regards to conspiracy theories and things like that. It is a very sad point that I can't make lots of money off of this, so let's forget about helping all the people out there suffering. And to me, it speaks volumes to the idea that we need to do something to change the monetization of, the whole medicinal world, the whole healthcare system. But once again, that's probably a whole nother podcast. Now, in your film, you collaborate with a guy named Roman who cured himself in, I think it was 5 months' time of Crohn's disease. Is that right? Yeah, he had late stage Crohn's disease that was really affecting his life. In fact, it was. I don't want to misspeak here on his behalf, but the doctors gave him an option. I think he was 20 when this happened. He got it when he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when he was 15, and it just got worse and worse to the point when he was around 20 years old. They said, "Listen, you're going to have to start removing large amounts of your intestine, to get this to continue living a relatively normal life." And after that, we have no answers after that. I think he might have even said, "So what happens when the Crohn's disease continues with my now shorter intestines?" And there was no answer to that. It seemed like it was a terminal thing that was going to just, end his life relatively, not like, within a few months, but it was something that was going to limit him and probably, be something that he'd have to suffer with most of his life. So he decided that he was going to investigate other ways of treating Crohn's, which led him to the Amazon, because there are some treatments for Crohn's disease that aren't available anywhere else in the world that you can find in the remote regions of the Amazon, where there are certain medicine men and medicine women who can
harness the power of certain herbs, not even necessarily ayahuasca, but there's certain herbs that we don't know about yet that are extremely good for Crohn's disease. So he sought out a shaman, and then that sort of led him down this path. And 10 years later, he walks into my life. I'm sure you and I are going to talk about synchronicity later. We can talk about the synchronicity of Roman and I actually finding each other. But yeah, so his Crohn's disease led him into shamanism, and it was extremely, extremely intense for him. The first 3 months he was put into a little, they call it a dieta hut. You see him in our film. They're just, our patients don't hang out in like a Club Med sandals environment, slapped down in the middle of the Amazon. It's bare bones. It's meant to deprive you of pretty much everything, that any contact of the outside world, anything that you're going to be able to do to escape your own reality, including no books, no cell phones, obviously, no talking to other people. So Roman was put in like solitary confinement in this jungle hut in the middle of nowhere. And he lived that way for 3 months. And, he said that, his Crohn's got much, much worse. He was also being given herbs and also doing regular ayahuasca ceremonies. But he said his Crohn's flared up and got much worse. And then, within like a month or two, it started getting noticeably better and better and better until, all the symptoms went away, and he wasn't using any medication or anything. And he went back to Brooklyn, which is where he's from Moldavia, which is right near Russia, or it's a part of the former Soviet Union. And he went back to Brooklyn, where his parents live, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor did another test on him to see how his Crohn's disease was, and there was no trace of it, and there hasn't been any trace of it since. So that was his little story of healing. And then he was beckoned by the shamans. I think it was Don Mariano was his shaman back then, who beckoned him to come back down and to continue apprenticing, and so he did. And so 9 years later, he and I meet, but that's after 9 years of him, getting serious training and pretty much being, off the grid and, learning these ways.
Isn't it fascinating? I love hearing stories like this because you get the idea like this happened to him for a very specific reason. He solved his problem, and as a result, it led him down a path of not only personal healing, but now bringing healing to other people. Then your film, now here we are talking about it. It's going to reach all these people. It's really just a beautiful example of, I'm very fond of the statement, life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And in this case, what would appear to be something very hard and trying and negative and life-threatening was actually happening for him and not to him. And by taking these very brave steps, it has led him to this amazing path of self-healing and helping to heal others.
Yeah, I think that's sort of, that's part of the shamanic way too, is that, diseases, in the West, we sort of hide and run from them. And, when somebody gets them, it's this big, it's a big deal where everyone gets scared. The person who's sick gets scared. The loved ones get sad. Everyone feels like, there's this big catastrophe. Whereas in some of these remote healing traditions, they're looked at more as an opportunity. And I don't mean, I say this really gently because there's plenty of people out there that are suffering from illnesses that they really can't heal from. And I'm not trying to make light of any of them. But I do think there are many illnesses, some of the biggest illnesses, depending on who you are and what you've done already to treat it, that are a portal. There, and this is me. This is not. I'm stealing this language from the shamans that are much wiser than me. But but I spend a lot of time with them, and this is the way they speak. They speak about it. They're more of a portal into greater awareness of who you are. Even illnesses that you can't recover from. Even illnesses that are ultimately going to take your life. You can shy away from them, try to pretend they don't exist. Use Western medicines to try to cut them out, or radiate them away, or you can turn and face them and just embrace what they have to teach you. And a lot of times, I've seen a few people make the transition, and I feel like the people that do it on the shamanic path, they learn so much about life. They learn so much about where they're going next. They learn so much about what the particular illness has to teach them, so that they leave this world with more, better prepared for what's going to happen next, and with more of a rich experience with their final days. So it's really interesting how we envision disease and death and dying in the Western world. But you and I could speak about this for hours. There could be books written about that. We simply have what the shamans would consider to be a very innocent and childish view of our own mortality.
Right. Right. And I think that's one of the things that the shamans, of course, are exploring, altered states of consciousness through, sacred plant medicines like ayahuasca. And that's one of the beautiful things about it, is you get a glimpse into these other realms. And of course, someone who's never taken it or is skeptical, I understand. I respect that. But once you've actually had the experience, it's kind of like saying, oh yeah, I don't believe that you've, driven that red Ferrari you're describing in detail. And it's like, yeah, but you've never even seen it or seen one, or I've sat in the drive. I've been there. I've experienced it firsthand. And until you have the experience, it's, I think that's the advantage these, shamans have had, is to get a glimpse. And that's why I really encourage everyone, it is not a path for everyone. But if you're brave enough and you really want to confront some of your own personal demons, that's what it seems like for me. Ayahuasca is it instantly brings up, here's blockages that you need to work through. And if these blockages have been in your system for a long time, years and decades, that's a lot of times when they manifest into dis-ease, right? You're not at ease. Yeah, that's my personal take on it, and I think it's a beautiful point that you bring up. Now, you decided to, so you met Roman. You decided to work with Roman, who'd already been at it for 10 years or so. Your plan was brilliant, I thought, to bring people with major issues to the jungle for 30 days, and it was people from various types of characters and diseases. Maybe it would be good if you just give a quick rundown of who the characters were and what their ailments were.
Sure. Yeah. So we brought down 8 people from around the world who had different illnesses. We had, you want to mention name or just health condition?
Yeah, probably health condition. You could just the guy with. Or the girl with, because people probably won't remember the names.
Oh, totally. So we had 3 patients that had cancer. We had a woman who had advanced late stage breast cancer. We had a gentleman who had late stage neuroendocrine cancer. We had another man from Australia who had prostate cancer. We had a young man who was suffering from drug addiction and depression. We had a woman who was suffering from IBS, another woman from the Midwest who was suffering from Crohn's disease, which is what Roman worked to cure. We have a woman from Connecticut, which is my home state, who was suffering from Parkinson's disease. And I believe the last, I think this is going to make 8. We had a gentleman from Florida who had type 2 diabetes.
One of the medicine men in the film, one of the medicine men names a plant that cures diabetes, and then your patient with diabetes reported, after a very short period of time, the lowest blood sugar he's ever had. I think he mentioned it was the same as his kids. Is that plant being curious? One thing that came to my mind, because it seemed like such a direct, hey, it's this exact, whereas some of the people with their disease, they're getting multiple things that appeared. And this particular guy, here's one plant. It seemed to work really quickly. Is this being used anywhere in Western society currently?
So the plant, he was on a couple different plants.
Okay, he was.
He was on a couple different plants, but the one that I think you're referring to is called tawari. And and he was on 2 plants, really. It was tawari and papaya. And tawari is actually it's another word for paudiarco, I don't know if you've ever had Pau d'Arco. I'm actually drinking a cup of it right now because it's a really,
I haven't.
It's a really good it's really good for stimulating your immune system. And I've got a little bit of a cold coming on, so I'm drinking. I love the taste of it. It's called Pau d'Arco, Pau space D, capital D apostrophe space, or capital ARCO. And
I'll have to check that out.
You can get this in Whole Foods. You can get it traditional medicinals, which is available at Whole Foods and probably just about every major natural health store carries carries Pau d'Arco, which is also known as Tawari in the region of the jungle we were in. So that's one thing you can use. I'm not making any promises to anyone who has type 2 diabetes that they can go about living the same lifestyle that they have if they're eating a lot of the standard American diet. I don't think this is going to help be your miracle cure. If you continue eating high sugar and fast foody kind of stuff. But if you're eating a really good diet that mimics the diet that the patients were on in our film, and you also try some Pau d'Arco, you could maybe experience some benefit. The other plant he was on is called papaya. And that's something that I don't think you can get here in the States. So he was on a blend of these two. But I would say that what the other factors in the film on top of the herbs were also helping him, like the diet, B, the ayahuasca ceremonies, and maybe as a third thing, just the full immersion in nature in a remote jungle hut where he's detached from the rest of society probably helps quite a bit too. So I think that it's sort of a blend of variables, that probably came together to produce the healing results you saw in the film.
Right. So all of of course, we're going to encourage, and at the end of this, we'll let everyone know where they can see the film themselves. But all of the patients took ayahuasca. Roman actually mentioned that ayahuasca is the mother of all plants, and from this plant, all other plants were discovered. I thought that was a really interesting statement. Can you elaborate on that? What you think he meant by that?
Sure. So a lot of what Roman speaks about is knowledge that's been passed on to him word of mouth from his teachers. So he calls it the lineage of direct transmission, which is a beautiful notion, which is, that the shamanic cultures in the Amazon and pretty much worldwide, there is no written language. There is no compendium of Shipibo, Kanibo, Amazonian shamanic knowledge that has kind of made its way, through the generations over the past 1,000 years. This stuff is all passed down word of mouth. So when shamanic apprentices, choose not to learn anymore, or an old shaman, passes on without finding an apprentice who wants to learn what he knows, then that knowledge dies with him. So it's kind of an epidemic. It's sort of just something that's it's just part of life. It's just part of what happens in the world. But when Roman says that ayahuasca is a mother of all plants, that's something that has probably been passed down, for 500 to 1,000 years, that bit of knowledge. So I can't really speak about it in terms, in clear terms. But what I can say is that the shamans that we work with, and this is not specific to us. This is sort of the way it is. But many shamans, the vegetalistas, they find the herbs they're going to prescribe to their patients in ceremony. So,
right.
so they'll be sitting there and in ceremony, and a lot of them will kind of just kind of almost nod off, for a second, and you'll wonder what the heck's happening, if you're aware enough to be looking around the circle. And a lot of times, they come back with a specific plant that's located in a specific region of the forest that they've never been. And they know that plant is going to be needed to work on somebody else in the circle, who's suffering from a certain illness. I've seen it before. I mean, I've gone out plant picking.
Fascinating.
I've gone out plant picking with one of our shaman friends down there, Edwin, and had him naming all these plants. Oh yeah, this is this one, this is that one, this is this one, and then he just grabs a plant. He's like, oh, thank God. Here it is. Grabs a plant, puts it in his basket. And I'm like, oh, what's that one? He's like, I have no idea what this one is. I've never seen this one before, but it came to me in ceremony, and I know that Lisa needs it for her, for her headaches.
That is incredible.
So, and the thing is, it seems very woo woo, and I'm sure that this is sort of like, where some people draw the line, or like, oh my God, that seems that seems totally unscientific and totally.
Someone who hasn't had an ayahuasca experience to see how intense and lucid it can be to have information come through to you.
But this is where some people get off the bus. People are like, okay.
For sure.
Oh, okay, that's great. That's great that you guys believe that, but that's completely careless. And what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Taking people down to the jungle to have them, being fed plants that no one even knows about yet.
The guy took some drugs and heard about.
Yeah, exactly.
In his head.
But when you watch what happens to the patient after they start taking that plant, and you see their symptoms subside, it's very, very compelling. It's very interesting. But it speaks to, that other part speaks to like a lot of the risk we took. I mean, some people thought I was putting a lot at risk by bringing these patients down, because I was, but I really believed in this medicine. And after I experienced it and started working with shamanism well before the film was shot, I was like, you know what? The world needs to know about this. They need to not just in this kind of like, aimed at the Burning Man crowd, which is like, I'm not trying to insult the Burning Man crowd, but, they're much more willing to suspend their disbelief and like love this kind of like the ayahuasca journey side of it, the Terrence McKenna side of it. And I was like, I want this to be something where we bring real patients who are at their wits' end, who have been failed by modern medicine, and who are willing to try anything to cure themselves. And they had to sign their lives away, essentially. They had to sign a release form that was probably about 50 pages long each before they came with me. But I mean, to me, it was like, this is worth it. If this goes wrong and somehow things happen, and I get in trouble for this, then it's worth it to me to try to get this message out there. And, somehow I knew the whole time that we were being watched, or being, this is another woo-woo thing for people to kind of, drop off on. But we all kind of felt like we had something watching over us while we were making this film, and that there was some greater force that was guiding us. Ever since we made the decision to make it, there was too many synchronicities and too many unexplainable occurrences that happened to sort of ignore. So yeah. So anyway, the idea that ayahuasca is a mother of all plants, I think it's part handed down shamanic wisdom that I wouldn't deem myself qualified to even discuss intelligently. And then also, I think it might just be proven by how these healers go about finding the plants through ayahuasca.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I thought I was wondering if that would be your answer, because I've heard the same thing. So it's really great to hear you actually had a firsthand experience of a shaman in an altered state, receiving a download of information, as I like to refer to it, and then going and actually locating that exact plant, then giving it to the patient, then seeing the benefits of it. And like you said, of course, this is where some people get off the bus, but those people really never got on the bus, because they're off before they've ever even tried it and seen for themselves what kind of profound, lucid. Roman says with ayahuasca, we enter into a conscious dream state, which is exactly what it's like. If you've ever had a lucid dream, I talked quite a bit in a past interview with Jonah Haas, who throws Lucidity Festival, and talked a lot about how you can have lucid dreams. And one of the things I spoke to him about is like, man, when I sleep like a rock. I remember my dreams sometimes, but certainly not lucid where I become awake in the dream. And when I took ayahuasca, personally, it was like having a lucid dream, but you never fell asleep. And so when you're in those altered states, that's something that maybe some people that would get off the bus with this whole conversation, maybe they've had an experience where in a dream they receive information. I know with me, I don't remember my dreams a lot of times, but I've had several dreams where they're almost a psychic quality, like dreaming my car got hit. It was parked down. I left it in town one night after having a few cocktails with friends, didn't want to drive it home, took a taxi home during my dream state. I dreamed I got hit by someone. My business partner, who actually I co-owned the car with at the time, was upset at me for leaving it down there. This whole thing played out in my dream. I woke up, got a phone call. That exact scenario played out. So, maybe some people who can't, necessarily this causes them to retract, have had some sort of a dream state experience. So I think if you take the tie-in of ayahuasca puts you into a conscious dream state, maybe that helps to get them partially there. They've had a somewhat similar experience with a lucid dream or something like that.
Yeah, I think that there's all kinds of unexplainable phenomena that kind of that tie into all of this stuff. I think that everyone's starting to kind of see more and more of it, especially on social media. That you hear about it all the time, all these different things that are happening around the world in people's realities. Ayahuasca is just sort of, it's sort of a gateway into I call it a forced near-death experience. Like it's like people say, many people are open to the idea of, people having these near-death experiences where they see the light and they see their family members and they're hovering above their body and their family, and they see things happening that they should not have no idea had happened because they were put under, or were too far gone in a coma or something to that effect. And people have a much easier time sort of believing, or at least suspending their disbelief, for those. And I personally think it's more of a cultural thing. I think that those things can tie right into all the other religious things that many of us are brought up with. And I think that they're easy to kind of, collectively, accept. But, I think that something like ayahuasca, where there's shamans and it could be witchcraft and it could be, all kinds of evil things that you're not supposed to do. I think that there's a lot more stigma to it, and there's almost an automatic disbelief and automatic dismissal of what's going on down in the jungle. So in some ways it's sad. In other ways it's great, because if everyone knew what was really happening, then there'd probably be a lot more ecotourism, and it would probably be getting stampeded on more than it already is.
Now, I quote Roman quite a bit because he had a lot of profound things to say, your partner in making this. And he said, also, by pushing our diseases away, the body stops sending nutrients to the disease, blood flow, that sort of thing. I thought that was a very interesting and telling statement as well. Basically, what he's saying is, and you tell me your interpretation, what I took from it was, if we're not dealing with the disease, instead of confronting it head on, it's sending the signal to not try and heal it, like ignore it, so to speak.
Yeah,
fair interpretation.
Yeah. I think that it ties into another piece of wisdom that was directly transmitted to Roman from other healers, and it's this sort of, there's a really kind of an interesting analogy, I guess, that's used in the jungle. When talking about disease in the jungle, and Roman speaks about this really eloquently. It's that, in the jungle, diseases are looked at as being mothers. Like they actually, they call diseases mothers in the jungle, because the idea is that this disease becomes pregnant with you to help you transform or metamorphosize, if that's even a word, into
it is now.
It is now. We'll just call that a word, into the next evolution of who you are going to become. So if you understand that, if you embrace it, if you allow the mother to teach you what she's there to teach you, then you are reborn anew, after you've processed what you need to process in that, incubation phase, and you come out of the experience a much wiser person, and you have a whole new take on life, a whole new lease on life, a whole new life itself in general. And if you resist, then there's almost like, I guess you could look at it as like a spiritual miscarriage, where you don't mature into,
don't pass the test, so to speak.
Yeah, you don't pass the test, and you sort of you you die. You pass, you move on, into the next iteration of who you're going to become in another life. So there's no good or bad. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about Amazonian shamanism, is that there is no good or bad. Life and death are seen as being very similar things. They're just, they're two sides of the same coin. Both are extremely beautiful. Both are extremely essential. So these stories don't necessarily have like the American happy endings that we like to hear, because we associate, the other side of it with being something very tragic. But yeah, so the idea that disease is something to be embraced is, I think, what he's saying. When he's talking about shunting blood away from the parts of your body that need it when you resist, is that you almost need to love your disease. You need to, and I've heard him say this to so many people who are sick in the jungle, is that instead of hating yourself for being sick, instead of hating the cancer or hating the diabetes or the depression or the drug addiction, whatever you have, you need to fall in love with it and understand it, because it almost reverse wires the thing, and it heals it.
Yeah, it makes me think of a statement that I really am fond of. What you resist persists. What you accept, you move through. And I think that is a great lesson for dealing with disease in your life. It's and the analogy is, as it being a mother is beautiful. It's like, are you viewing your life as happening to you or for you? And if you can start viewing your life as happening for you, then everything that comes through is happening for a very specific reason that is supposed to spur you on to the next greatest and grandest version of yourself, as you mentioned. So I think that is just an amazing piece for people to take away who are listening to this out there, who maybe have some sort of an issue or will have some future issue. Approach it with open arms, embrace it, love it, and by all means explore alternative ways of healing yourself, because and we'll get to the results here in a moment. It's really incredible what people are doing who are taking this kind of approach to dealing with disease in their own life. And you mentioned, of course, death as well. One of the medicine men in the film, he mentioned, we've demonized death in Western society, yet there can be no life without it. And by staying away from death, you stay away from life as well. And I think that is, such a huge issue in our lack of understanding of the ultimate nature of reality, and that death is just like stepping into another room. And once again, using something like ayahuasca, and it gives you kind of a glimpse of that death-like experience, altered state, and you realize, and of course there's infinite stories out there about people having near-death experiences. My brother is really fascinated with that topic, so he's always researching near-death experiences, and there are just countless numbers of them out there, of people who have been clinically dead and they're having full-blown experiences that are beautiful and transcendent, and then they come back, all of a sudden their heartbeat returns, and they have this great message to bring. And so often we're so worried about fearing this experience and caught up in this physical reality where, the electromagnetic spectrum, I saw recently, you're seeing 1/10 of a billionth or some, I don't even know if I said that right, but it's some insane number. In what you're actually perceiving is a fraction of what's really going on. And I think that crosses over into, life beyond death as well, where the fraction, this life, what's happening. So I have a friend, actually, I'll share this story really quickly. A friend who started using ayahuasca recently, and she was an empath. When she was a kid, she would meet people and she would instantly, if they were really happy, she'd be like she was drunk, because she'd feel their energy. If they were depressed or sad, she would feel that. And so and she would tell them things about themselves, having this, psychic ability, which we all have to some degree. But then you have the Michael Jordans of the bunch, right? I can go shoot baskets and hit some, but some people were born to be, stars at this. And this is her case. She has, very, very sensitive, and people started hushing her, don't tell these people anything that you're perceiving about them. Stop. So she got into her 20s, and she was this empath, she didn't know how to turn it off, this ability to feel other people's energy and emotions. So she started drinking. She told me she would drink sometimes 2 bottles of vodka a day just to numb it. And as of a couple of years ago, she had she decided she had to do something to change this in her life. And so she started using ayahuasca. And of course, someone who's already very psychic and, having these kind of very open person, having these amazing experiences her whole life, she just had incredible experiences. And one of them she shared with me that was fascinating is she said she went to the realm of what she called our oversouls. And she said, if you can't imagine how vast of beings we actually are. She's like, Brandon, that's just an avatar that your oversoul has taken on. And I went to this realm where I saw all the oversouls, almost like watching on a computer screen, for lack of a better word, all their lives. And each life is like a 5-minute, flash in the pan. And she said it was fascinating. Some oversouls were very engaged in what they were seeing and watching their characters very closely, their avatars. And others were kind of yawning and bored with the whole process. But, the thing that she took away from it was how vast we actually are and how this life is just literally, it's like a 5-minute blip on the screen of your oversoul's actual composite experience. So I think, those sorts of perspectives just really, it puts it in perspective, what this life is and how there's so much more and nothing to fear as far as, how short it is. And so many people live in constant fear about death. So for me, I just thought it was a beautiful story. And of course, she did a much better job than I painting the picture because she lived it. But yeah, so anyway, let's see here. One of the other things that I found really interesting, one of the medicine men in the film talked about how after treatment, we must change our life with using your heart as your guide instead of your head. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think it's sort of all in line with what we're talking about. This idea of, our fear of death, I think, is really more our fear of the unknown. And this is my opinion, but I believe it's pretty much the opinion of the jungle healers that we hang out with, and it's something that is delivered on my front door every single time I sit in an ayahuasca ceremony, because as many times as I've done it, I am scared to do it every single time. Because there's a part of me that fears the unknown. The part of me that fears the unknown is not my heart. Think I'm going to Peru in November, and I'm going to be probably sitting in a bunch of ceremonies. My brain is partly terrified, even though it's pretty familiar territory. My heart has no problem with it. In fact, my heart is telling me, this is going to be amazing. You're going to come out of this, and it might be a little bit hard, but you're going to have an even better understanding of your path and where to go next with the sacred science, with your life, with your family. So I feel like this idea of the unknown is something that we've been battling against for thousands of years with our brain. Some people might even call it the male brain. Our masculine sides, have this need for predictability, reliability, quantifiability. Whereas the feminine parts of us are much, much more okay with the unknown. You could even call it chaos energy. So I think that what Habib is saying when he's saying we need to lead with our hearts, not our heads, is that it's time for us to embrace our inner feminine, and that people tend to think that that's sort of like this, the woman in us. It's really not that at all. And they're literally energies that we can use as part of our navigation system. And when you rely too much on one, then you get thrown out of balance. So having a healthy, middle ground between the two when you go through life is the challenge, but it's also the way to make the best decisions. So I think he's saying, I think that most of the shamans in the jungle agree that we're a very, very male-brained society, and that the divine feminine has been squashed and repressed. I mean, you could look at it. So it's so obvious if you look at the history of our history over the last 500 to 1,000 years, what we've done to women. Whether we're talking about, in the Spanish Inquisition, whether we're talking about the Salem witch trials, we've done whatever we possibly can to make sure that, the divine feminine is not fully realized in both men and women, so that we fall into line and live very predictably. So I think that what they're sort of saying is, it's like that Seal song, we're never going to survive unless we get a little bit crazy. So I think
Great song.
These guys really feel, and I agree, that it's time for us to start tapping into the side of ourselves that likes to play in the depths, and that isn't so shallow and isn't so hell bent on the day-to-day survival tactics of competition and private property, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, the divine feminine versus masculine. And I've heard it explained a way that I really resonate with. And it's that, we're all part of the one source, God, whatever you want to call it, creator, and chips off the block, so to speak. And how source experiences herself is through separation, becomes Nick and Brandon and everyone listening, these apparently separate, but what we're finding more and more every day, actually, the same, as far as the physical stuff that we're made of, stardust essentially, right? And in one consciousness as well. And so how it evolves, source evolves is divides itself, forgets its true nature, experiences pain, negativity, fear, all the things that it's not, because what it is love, right? But if you have no context, it means nothing. So when it's experiencing separation, when source is going through a cycle of separation, the masculine is kind of dominant because it's, we've got to fend and fight and, all these hardships that, of course, we know our ancestors have experienced for eons. And then you enter a phase where there's enough of that sort of separation from source, and the collective starts waking up, which we're seeing happening all over the world. People coming online, remembering their divinity, remembering their higher selves, realizing that, whatever I'm doing to you, I'm doing to an extension of self. And, we'll most likely feel the energetic repercussions of that because you are a reflection. We are reflections of one another. And during that phase, you enter back into the feminine, right? And that's what you hear a lot of talk about. We've entered this new cycle, and, even 2012 is referred to as, not the end of the world. The Mayans really meant that's the new cycle, returning to the feminine and, getting in touch with these sorts of concepts. So I fully agree with kind of your statement there. And I really resonate with that kind of interpretation of why you need masculine dominant cycles in linear time like we've experienced, and then why it makes sense for the feminine to become more in the driver's seat, so to speak.
Absolutely. Well, I think when it comes to healing, this is an ancient yogi. The beautiful thing about shamanism is that it's the core principles are kind of reiterated throughout the world. The different folk healing traditions, whether you're in India, whether you're in Australia, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, on the Siberian steppes, like there's very similar understandings of what it takes to create true healing and healing miracles. And, this idea of chaos, and the unknown as being the enemy, I think that true miracles only happen when you learn how to embrace the unknown and dance with it. There's no healings I've ever personally seen happen that didn't require someone to surrender to the unknown and
face your fears.
Yeah, because things can be pulled out. If you want to really interrupt a pattern and change your DNA, let's say. There's certain interventions that need to happen, and I think that most shamanic practitioners would agree that it happens through entering these states of trance where you're able to pull things out of that chaos energy and chaos is a bad word because everyone thinks chaos is bad, but just the unknown, trusting in the unknown, right, surrendering to it, and allowing to come through what needs to come through. That I think is very deeply connected to leading with your heart.
Yeah, facing those fears. It comes back to facing your fears, and so many people are running and resisting and pushing the disease away. And I know people in my own life that I'm very close to, and the idea of doing something like ayahuasca or any sort of consciousness altering substance scares them greatly, and it's because they're afraid of facing what's going to come up. But I personally believe and have found from my own experience, when you do face it, it's, one of my friends was just telling me a dream, actually, who I referenced earlier, Jonah Haas. He was just telling me about a dream where he would constantly dream of a scary, like werewolf kind of creature, and it would chase him and torment his dreams. And finally, one day in his dreams, he faced it, and it came charging at him, slobbering, and like it was going to devour him. And he just opened his arms in his lucid dream state, and the wolf embraced him, and then they began dancing and laughing. And I think it's a beautiful, story of what is required of us in this dimension. Face your fears, and then you transcend them, and you find it's really, the big scary monster is really just another part of self that needs to be healed, that is a blockage. And it comes up in these archetypes and symbols of a wolf, or, a scary old, crone woman, or, things like these you even see in these archetypes and dreams and so forth. And it's something that so many people are running from. And if you can find a way to face them in any way, whatever that looks like, do it, because once again, what you resist persists, and what you accept, you move through. And I've seen it too many times to debate the truth of this statement.
Absolutely, yeah. I just got goosebumps because I had an experience once with an old crone type woman.
Oh, really?
In an out of body experience that I was actually literally just connecting the dots as you were saying that, like having a little bit of an epiphany. I'm like, holy crap.
Wow.
I forgot that happened. And then when I did that, this certain physical ailment that I had been suffering from most of my life pretty much dissipated after that. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Synchronicity at its finest right there.
Yep.
Live and direct, everyone. We always share the stories, and then we create the stories. Oh, man. So one of the other substances that we've referenced a little bit in the podcast here that might be lesser known as a sort of mind-altering, consciousness-altering substance is San Pedro, and that's something that the patients took as well. I've heard San Pedro referred to as grandfather, and ayahuasca referred to as grandmother. What are your own experiences? What were the differences that you saw with the patients, and even personally? How would you kind of differentiate these two substances?
So something really interesting that I've been blown away by with this work is that in the Amazon and in other American Indian cultures, there are genders to plants. We don't really think about that too much when we're taking we're having herbal tea, or working with whatever type of dieting regimen we're on here in the States, or in the Western world in general. But in those cultures, these plants have genders. And when I first started working with them, I'm like, oh, this is really nice. It's very quaint that they have these really cool myths about these plants, and that they feel that they have genders. And that just seems like, my rational Western brain was very politely dismissive of it, but I was willing to kind of indulge in the romance of the whole thing, until you actually experience the plant. So when you experience ayahuasca, and for me, and I think I'm speaking very generally here, but I think that most people would agree, when you have a really strong ayahuasca ceremony, whether you encounter it directly or whether you just sense it's there next to you or in the room with you, there is a very feminine energy, a very old, wise, feminine energy. For me, it's my first ayahuasca experience, which was probably the most traumatic and mind-blowing of all of them. I was in direct communication with an elder woman that I think was probably, like grandma ayahuasca. Sure. Potentially it could be any number of things, but there was you can make out a very obvious gender to these plants when you're working with them. And there's no way to really describe how, it's like you were saying before with the Ferrari reference, like you have to be in this, you have to experience it to understand it. But there is, you have these very powerful and undeniable knowings during ceremonies, and one of them is, for me, it's very obvious to tell the gender with grandfather or San Pedro, or they also call it Wachuma. it's, yeah, it's known as grandfather. So abuela or abuelo for grandfather. It's a very masculine energy, and in the same vein, like many women, and I'm making very broad statements here, but I think they're pretty accurate. Many times you'll see men who are very seasoned, have worked with plant medicine before, walk into their first ayahuasca ceremony, alongside women who have never had any experiences like this ever. And you'll see the men literally crumble in front of you and do a heap of, just what it destroys them in a great way.
Right.
And they leave the experience humbled and taking away a lot from it. But having gone into this ceremony thinking that they probably, like, I got this. I've worked with mushrooms. I've done acid. But you see them totally humbled and brought to their knees in a really good way by this plant. Whereas a lot of times you see these women who have no experience with any mind-altering substances walk into an ayahuasca ceremony, and they are just in complete bliss the entire time. Like, they're absolutely, it's almost like they've reconnected with this other part of them, and they're dancing with this thing all night.
Right.
I mean, I've seen it so many times. So conversely, you can see the same thing happen, but the opposite way with San Pedro. You'll see, I've been in ceremonies before where there's men who have never tried it before, along with, next to women who have had plenty of San Pedro in their past, and you see the men just, it's like it's almost like it's an ally. Like, it all of a sudden, like, yeah, there's it's mind altering. It's totally it's otherworldly. It taps into all kinds of parts of you that you've never experienced before. But it also, I mean, as a male, having tried it many times, it does something to you. It feels like it gives you power, and that it's totally, supercharging parts of you that have never been accessed before. Whereas, I've seen in the same ceremony, women, just literally like in the fetal position, curled up around a tree, like, just leave me alone. This is too much. So I feel like the genders, a lot of times, it's easy for a women to work with feminine plants. Not to say that they get more benefit, but I think that there might just be less work or less of a getting to know you, phase with a feminine plant if you're a female, and less of a getting to know you phase with a masculine plant if you're a male. Again, these aren't my words. This is stuff I've been taught by other healers in the Amazon. So I'm really I want to qualify that. Like, the knowledge I have is from my own experience with the plants, but it's also a lot of knowledge that I've been blessed to be given, over the past decade.
Yeah, and it's something that, once again, people who maybe aren't on the bus and haven't experienced, either of these plants, you can think of it in terms of, I've heard it put before, different countries, regions, cultures have masculine or feminine energy. For example, if I say, Germany and France, which one would you think is masculine dominant energy and which one is a feminine, right? German has this very masculine feel. You can even listen to the languages, right? And so I think it translates into all kinds of areas of life, from, cultures to plants to, it's just like this, it's part of the physical realm to have this, and as you said earlier, we all have it in us, both masculine and feminine. But some things have more of one than the other, maybe. So, yeah, let's get to the results here. I mean, 30 days in the middle of nowhere, normal people taking, not only consciousness-altering plants like ayahuasca and San Pedro, but a lot of other specific plants for their disease or their ailment. Why don't you, Nick, give us a little breakdown of what you found?
So the first patient I guess we can discuss is Joel, who had type 2 diabetes. He ended up actually leaving very, very early. He couldn't take it. I mean, not nothing against him, nothing, not to slight him at all, but he just wasn't willing to continue the protocol.
Too tough. It seemed for his, just staying in the environment seemed to be a real struggle for him, being cut off from normal comforts and all the bugs and, heat.
he wasn't. He was this big fellow, and he you just would think he'd be the one who would probably be able to deal with the snakes and the spiders more than anybody else. But he wasn't having it. But that said, but by the time he left, we had two doctors with us. That was another part of this. The sacred science. We try to, and with our site and everything we're doing, with our community, it's really trying to find this intersection between where good ancestral healing traditions and good science intersect. So we had two doctors there that were monitoring the whole thing, and by the time, I think it was by 7 days in, he got his tests done, and his blood sugar had completely balanced out, and he was giddy. He was absolutely couldn't believe it. He said, like you had mentioned before, that his levels were the exact same as his kids. So he, in terms of his healing benefit, I think it was pretty obvious. And so but even with that being said, he couldn't take it. Really couldn't.
Yeah, he was like, he seemed to be like, wow, this is amazing. I'm cured. I'm 10 days in or whatever. Okay, get me the hell out of here.
Right. So and then he left, and so that was Joel. So then just to go through the rest of them, I would say, so first of all, our prostate cancer patient, he was getting all kinds of tests done too. That the remote tests done, and by the time he had left, his levels, his PSA levels had dropped to well below the normal range for your prostate, and he couldn't. He was absolutely. This is something that just doesn't happen. You don't see that happening with prostate cancer. You have to do something to kind of make that happen. You have to, either get surgery or get radiation or some kind of a combination of the two. So he saw tremendous results with his prostate cancer within the 30-day period we were there. So two other cancer patients, Gary, and this is probably going to ruin the plot, but I think that's okay for people to know. One of the patients passes away during the film,
right?
And it's sort of not you don't know who it is until most of the way through the film. But it was Gary, and it's interesting, with Gary, he is somebody who. He became such a dear friend to me, and I think it was day 10 or day 11, maybe. He had these tumors all throughout his intestines, and he couldn't put clothes. He couldn't put his pants on or sit down without it just being extremely painful, just to even be sitting and being where he was. And after, I think it was like the third ayahuasca ceremony, he called me over. They each have a walkie-talkie that they use to call us, because their huts are so far away. They're all in the middle of nowhere and not close to each other either. So they have to kind of use a walkie-talkie if they need something. And so he called me out and told me, he's like, I don't get it. This one morning, he's like, I don't get it. He's like, I woke up. He's like, I can't feel any pain. I feel like they're gone. He's like, I feel like my tumors are all gone. I just don't understand. He's like, it's amazing. I'm seeing. He was like delighted, and we were delighted too.
Wow!
But that night, it was either that night or the day after. The night after that, he passed away. And there's a whole there's a whole story about that too. But it was really interesting, and I think everyone agrees. And even when we've shown the film in big theaters, with sold out with a big Q&A afterwards and tons of doctors in the audience, everyone's always sort of said that you could just see that he was at peace and just delighted,
absolutely,
with his life and with where he was, and that there was probably no better way for him to go.
And that he would have wasn't it said that he would have went no matter where he was? If he had been in a hospital, the best hospital in the world, they expect, obviously no one has a crystal ball, but they expect that he would have passed.
Absolutely. And So yeah, so we were, it was one of those things where it shook us, obviously, but then we just continued, and we saw it for what it was, and we're, it was this amazing transition, and we continued, and we did a real gut check, but afterwards we were like, this was probably the most amazing. And I talked to afterwards. I called his sister, who was his point of contact via satellite phone, and she told me, she's like, listen, she was laughing and crying at the same time when I called her, and she's like, first of all, I said I was sorry. I'm like, I'm so sorry that he passed away. And she's like, why are you sorry? She's like, are you kidding me? She's like, we didn't, Gary kind of tricked you a little bit, in a really endearing way. He had been diagnosed right before he came down. We interviewed him maybe a month and a half before he came, and a week before he came, he had gone in for another appointment with his doctor, and they had said, listen, you have like literally days to live. Like, this is not your. So he barely got down. He actually missed his flight, the first flight down, and we had to go figure out a way of getting him when he got there, because he just couldn't get through the airport fast enough to kind of get to us. And to get his connecting flight. So his sister was like, the thing he wanted the most was to come hang out with you down in the jungle and to kind of experience the Amazon, before he died. And we knew we weren't going to ever see him again. And if for some reason we did, it was going to be the most miraculous thing ever. But we knew he was probably not going to come back. So that was a pretty amazing thing.
Beautiful story.
So one of the results that I think shook everybody, was Nicola, the woman with Parkinson's disease. When we were down there, the treatments that were being given to her were helping a bit, but one of the medicine men, Habin, who we spoke about before, he specializes in treating Parkinson's patients, which is part of the reason why we brought him in. And he was like, listen, this protocol is decent. If she had 6 months here, then this might be something that she'd benefit tremendously from. But if we really want to give her some results and really help her in a shorter period of time, we need to work with this one plant called Toe. And Toe is the jungle version of Datura. Have you heard of Datura before?
I've not.
Datura is the angel's trumpet plant. We have them all over the Bay Area up here, and I'm sure you probably have them down by where you are in Costa Mesa. Maybe you don't. It might be a little bit too arid down there, but you'll see them. You've seen them before. If I pointed one out to you on the street, you'd be like, oh, I know that plant. It's a big white trumpet looking plant that hangs facing down.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about now.
So they're used in Native American medicine up here in ancient Maya medicine as well, in Central America, because they're highly hallucinogenic. But there's a larger version of them that grows in the jungle. It's called Brugmansia grandiflora. So it's just the bigger version of the plant. It's actually a tree, as opposed to up here it's a shrub. In the jungle, it's a big tree, and it has these huge angel's trumpets hanging off of it. And they're I'm not saying that they're more hallucinogenic than Datura, but they're extremely mind altering. And
Interesting.
There's something that are considered to be a power plant. So whereas ayahuasca, as intense as she can be, she's a teacher plant. And I believe San Pedro is considered a teacher plant too. This is not a teacher plant. This is a power plant. And I think that the difference is that in a teacher plant, the experience can get really rough, but there's always a built-in ally, or at least a built-in way out to sort of know who you are, and to remember that you took the plant, and that this isn't a perpetual thing that you're going to be experiencing forever. Whereas, and I might be botching this. This is something that for your listeners who are even more familiar with this phenomenon, then I apologize. But I think this is pretty much it. A power plant doesn't have a teacher. A power plant is going to take you to where it's going to take you, and it's not necessarily going to show you the way out. So. Right. You can people lose their minds on Toe, and people die on Toe. The same way you've probably heard of Iboga or Ibogaine.
Oh, right.
So that, that's a plant that people can go blind on, lose their minds on. Some people even die taking it because it's something that you need to sort of have an experienced shaman with you to be all right with. So he suggested Toei for Nicola because he said this is a plant that I prescribe to my Parkinson's patients, and it creates dramatic results. And so we had to think about it because he told us all the dangers, and we talked to Nicola, and she said, I don't care, I want to try it. So they did it for a couple sessions over the course of like 3 or 4 days, and it was intense. Like when they were doing these ceremonies, they were like day-long ceremonies, and they were both in these altered states. But after like the third or fourth day, she was probably 50% of her tremors went away.
Wow.
And she was able to stand up herself and walk. Like she actually could walk without using a cane or a walker, which she was not. She was using a cane the entire time, actually a walker the entire time. Her speech was so affected by the Parkinson's, because again, it was late. It's a very advanced Parkinson's, that you had a hard time making out what she said, what she was telling you. And by the time after she took the Toei with Habin, not only could you hear her and she was speaking smoothly, but you realized that she had this really elegant English accent that no one knew she even had, because the Parkinson's had made her speech so hard to discern that you couldn't tell anything besides what she was, just the root word that she was trying to tell you. So,
incredible.
This beautiful thing where we saw her like the third or fourth day, and we walked in and she like stood up, walked over to the door without anything. And she just kind of started talking. And I was like, this is not happening. Like, what?
That is incredible.
So, I mean, there's a lot, I could go on about the other ones, the movie, let's let the movie, people can watch the movie for the rest of the results. They'll see what happened at the end of the movie, but there's some pretty amazing, things that happened during those 30 days. And I don't think we're trying to say that, that this is the end all be all, and that, hey, don't trust modern medicine. Shamanism has all the answers. I just think that we're trying to give this forgotten tradition its day, in the spotlight, so that people can realize that when they're given a terrible diagnosis by their doctor, it doesn't mean it's over. That there's plenty of other things to try, and there's plenty of amazing wisdom traditions out there that are going to help you either heal or confront the fullness of what the rest of your life looks like with a disease that's incurable.
Yeah. That's an amazing story, and really you go into more depth here than they have time for, I suppose, in the movie. So that really paints a picture that is truly astounding and beautiful. Yeah,
I don't know. That's what we're all about. I mean, when it comes down to it, I love these ancient wisdom traditions. It's like my favorite thing. If you saw my herb closet, and all the stuff that we do in my household, I love this stuff. It's innately, I am innately drawn to it. It's something that doesn't need, I do have a BS barometer. Some people I think are charlatans that are trying to pass off as having knowledge that they don't. But I think that all in all, earth medicine, if you want to call it that, is something that is incredible. And I think that it's something that is grounding, and it's largely overlooked by modern civilization. And it's something that is so enriching on so many levels, beyond just healing your body. It's just something that is so fulfilling to be a part of. That's what we're about. And, the projects we have coming up, we've got a docuseries coming out in 2016. It's all about healing other people and watching people as they recover against all odds from illnesses that their doctors have told them were terminal.
What is the name of that? The forthcoming?
We have a docuseries coming out. It's called Amazing Healing Stories. And
okay, cool.
It's going to be following. It's going to be. We're in the middle of shooting it right now. It's pretty sick. It's going to be. You're going to be seeing a lot of people recovering from major.
It's pretty healing, not sick, right?
It's very healing. Yeah, it's very. It's really my thing is I don't like it when people are told that they can't do something. And so our stuff is really meant, if nothing else, to inspire hope and curiosity in people who might have their backs against the wall and be in a dark place.
Wonderful. I look forward to that, and I'm sure the audience will look forward to that. And we'll talk here in a moment about where they can actually watch A Sacred Science, and also, where they can tune into that when it is available. But real quickly, we've got a couple other people that we didn't. You had the person with, I think, Gretchen, maybe with irritable bowel syndrome. And what was her
Gretchen? Oh man, Gretchen she's become a dear friend, of ours since the film. She went down with terminal IBS. If that's the medical way of saying it, but
I did not with it. Yeah.
But she after 2 weeks down there, all of her symptoms went away. She came down. She was in a bad way. And, her doctors had said that she might need to do surgery and all kinds of other undesirable things, probably along the same lines of what the doctors told Roman. And after 2 weeks down there, her symptoms went away, and she has been IBS free ever since. And she's gone back to a kind of a normal lifestyle, a normal American lifestyle, but I think she's eating very well, and she's still taking some of the herbs that she took down there. But her IBS went away, which was pretty incredible. Our Crohn's disease patient, Jessica, she tried so many things. She was down there. She actually stayed down there for 60 days, and she is still, I haven't talked to her in this year, but she's still suffering from Crohn's disease and trying to heal it naturally. But she's written us some pretty amazing emails, talking about how, even though she didn't heal her Crohn's, the spiritual awakenings that she had, and the parts of the fears that she had never knew she had, that she had to deal with while she was down there, have made her a totally different person. So it's not sort of, the fact is she didn't heal down there, but I love that most people, actually no, every one of our patients, whether they did or didn't heal their illness, they've told us or very clearly showed us that they had tremendous spiritual healing. And
that was Melinda's case with breast cancer as well. She didn't have as much success as some of the other patients, but also I think it's interesting, you say the Jessica with Crohn's had the spiritual kind of awakening, and Melinda kind of expressed the same thing. Even though her breast cancer, treatment was somewhat resistant, she gained new spiritual insights, I believe she said.
Totally. Melinda came down, and she was one of those veterans that kind of came down thinking that she knew what she was getting into, and thinking that she had worked with ayahuasca before. She had worked with visionary plants. She had spent tons of time in an ashram, I think in North Carolina. So she was like, this is my wheelhouse.
My world. Yeah.
This is my wheelhouse. Yeah. So there was almost like less of a, how do I even say it respectfully? There was just less room in her reality to let in the experience, I think. And I think we even talked to her about it quite a bit. And I even though she was open, quote unquote, I don't know that she was open to the subtleties of what they were trying to show her. And that was an ongoing conversation between her and Roman, and her and a few of the other shamans down there. Was just, you have to, we know that you've worked with these medicines before, but we're trying to show you something that you might not have seen. So, but she didn't, she didn't realize, she didn't get that, I don't think, until after she left, and it was powerful. I think that for most of the people, in the film, there was sort of like this confrontation. There was like the day of reckoning that every one of them had. There was at least one or two of these days for everybody where it felt like they were up against the wall. Their reality came crashing down on them. They didn't know if they were going to be able to do it, if they were going to be able to continue. And then there was like, you know, on the other side of it, there was this, you know, metamorphosis where one day they're saying that, and then the next day I go and visit them in their hut, you know, hoping that they're feeling better. And not only are they feeling better, but they're like thriving. You know, there was a scene in the film where John, you know, who has prostate cancer, you know, literally yelling at, you know, Roman, you know, and swearing at him, you know, and saying how much of, you know, how, it's sort of the argument didn't really make much sense, but I mean, that's just jungle healing for you, is like you get to these places where you're just kind of, you know, reality has become very thin. You know, the veil has become very thin. But then the next day, you know, we go and visit him, and he's like, oh my God, that was the darkest moment, and I feel like a new man now. So there is sort of like, you know, as Roman likes to say, maybe this is the best closing to sort of end this on with regard to Amazonian shamanism is, he says, most of the time we need to break down before we break through. Beautiful. And I think that that's sort of what you see in the film, is that it's not easy. It's not a smooth ride for anybody. There's, you know, I think the last person that we need to hit on here is Juan, who had severe addiction and depression, and you know, by the end of, you know, he goes through a dark night of the soul too, that you see in the film, and you know, he just doesn't know if he's going to be able to make it through. And by the end of the film, he's kind of like this sage, like, you know, to be shaman's apprentice, who's like, you know, totally feeling incredible, totally kicked his depression. You know, I mean, you know, hasn't used substance since, and wow. It has been studying with Roman, you know, to become a shaman's apprentice, you know, since the film came out. So, you know, incredible. There's great healing breakthroughs, but again, you know, we're not trying to say that everybody healed, you know, and I don't think that you would get that you're going to get a perfect 8 for 8 in any school of medicine. Absolutely. We're just trying to show people what's possible. You know, because every one of these people that came down were told by their doctors that they needed to use either an ongoing, you know, prescription drug, or we're just, you know, or some severe surgery, or we're just beyond repair altogether. So, you know, we're starting with the odds against us, and, you know, getting a 5 out of 8. Incredible results. So that's the story. Beautiful, beautiful. I encourage everyone to go check it out for themselves. I definitely have enjoyed hearing even more information from discussing it with you, and I know my audience has had to find this as fascinating as I have. Where can people go and watch the film? Where can they watch The Sacred Science? So if people want to check out the movie, they go to thesacredscience.com/film_screening. And that'll take them to a page where they can register for the event, and they can access it. And there's all kinds of interviews that happen during the screening. It's a 10-day screening that they'll have access to, that has a bunch of different speakers on different days of the event that are going to be sharing other wisdom traditions and ways of incorporating this knowledge into your daily life. Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, definitely encourage everyone who's interested in alternative methods of healing. Check this out. It really, you know, you've heard the results here yourself, but when you can kind of see, it's one thing for us to paint the picture of what it's like there in the jungle, and you really get a glimpse of how brave these souls are, where they're struggling with disease and, you know, severe challenges, and they put themselves in this, what is not the most, it's certainly not a Marriott or Hilton experience, but I think that's what contributes to the actual healing. They're getting in touch with nature and their roots, and confronting their, you know, demons, fate, you know, going through the dark night of the soul, as you put it. And I highly encourage everyone to watch it. And of course, as far as the future documentary or docuseries you were talking about, they'll also be able to find that. I'm assuming links will be out there on The Sacred Science once that comes out. Absolutely, yeah. And, you know, once they register for the event, then we'll send them an invite to that new docuseries once it's available. Great. So, well, one of the last questions that I always like to ask, no matter who I'm interviewing, is
and it sounds like you already have something you alluded to earlier in the conversation, a story of synchronicity, serendipity, or positive paranormal event that you would like to share with us here?
Sure. Yeah. So when we decided, my wife and I decided that the next film that we were going to make was about shamanism while we were on a cross-country trip. We were literally in my Volkswagen driving across the country, and we were like, having a discussion. We're like, wait, why have we not, so this is, we had already looked into treating, naturally treating Parkinson's, but it had led us to sort of this idea of shamanism. And we're like, wait, why would we not make a film about this concept? So once we started thinking about that and we put it out there and just literally, just started taking concrete steps towards making this film, within 2 weeks, I found this one person, this one shaman, 3 different ways. My friend Mark called me and said, listen, if you're going to make a film about shamanism, I have a guy that I think you have to meet. He lives, he comes through Colorado. My friend Mark lives in Colorado. He's like, he comes through Colorado. He does ceremonies every once in a while. I don't know him personally. I've never met him, never seen him, never sat in a ceremony, but he's sort of this legendary guy who, people talk about. Comes through and does ceremonies, and then he's gone, for another year. I'm like, okay. I'm like, and so then another friend of mine, Nick Ortner, he created a film called The Tapping Solution. He and I made the Tapping Solution film together. He said to me, listen, this girl he was dating at the time, he's like, my girlfriend knows this shaman that she works with every once in a while out here in the tri-state area. And she said that if you're making a film about shamanism, you have to meet this guy. I'm like, okay. And so then one night, I'm just kind of like doing my own research. I'm just kind of trying to find, just people who have credibility, people who have some kind of a paper trail behind them, which is very hard in Amazonian medicine because, there isn't much access to technology. And
sure,
a lot of this stuff is kind of kept on the down low, the hush. So I found this guy, and I'm like, this guy, why do I, I was like reading about him through these deep and different blog posts, from people, and I keep on coming across this name. Like, why does this name keep on popping up? I got to figure out who this guy is. And so then it turns out that that my friend Mark and this woman Cynthia, who has no idea who Mark is, and lives in a completely different area of the world, and my late night deep blog searches are all the same guy. So I was like, wait a second. So all paths lead to Roman. I'm like, okay, let's see if I can meet with him. And so he and I had a meeting in Brooklyn one night when he happened to be in the country. And he and I met each other, and there was this kind of like weird smile that creeped across his face, and he started nodding at me. He's like, okay, I think we're going to do this together. And so that was it. But synchronicity, I mean, having 3 different avenues to the same person right off the bat, and having that person be as amazing of a healer as Roman is, I mean, that's one of the better synchronicities that I've ever experienced.
Oh, that's really fascinating. Whenever you see something pop up like that multiple times in your world, and I just got back from a trip a couple days ago, and I had supported, this is on a slightly different note, but I supported this project called Re-Inhabiting the Village, you may be aware of. And it's a book on all sorts of, different people who are involved with doing eco villages and things like that, and alternative modes of energy, and just so much different. It's a fascinating book. I just got it, and I just happened to flip through it yesterday because it just came in the mail. And who do I see featured at one point is Roman. So he's mentioned in there, and a little snippet on him. I didn't even have a chance to read it yet, but it features all kinds of people from around the world. So yeah, I would say that definitely is a synchronicity leading you to where you were supposed to go. And we've all, anyone who sees the film or hears this podcast and hears you explain it, obviously it was very meant to be that the two of you come together. What you've produced is absolutely fascinating and so needed in the world for especially the people out there who are skeptics. The way you portrayed it, it really helps to bring the science to something, so sacred and, that most people can't grasp or believe is real, and you've shown it. And so I applaud you for the work that you've done, Nick. I look so forward to following everything that you do in the future. I will definitely be keeping my eyes and ears peeled for the docuseries. What was the name of it one more time?
Amazing Healing Stories.
Amazing Healing Stories. Everyone, keep your eyes and ears out for that. Check out The Sacred Science. Once again, Nick, thank you so much for joining me here. I have one last question I'll leave you with that I also ask everyone. 60 seconds or less. What is the meaning of life according to Nick Polizzi?
The meaning of life. The meaning of life is to forget where we come from and then rediscover it again.
Beautiful. I love when people give me the short, concise, powerful meanings, their personal meanings. So I love that one. Thank you so much again, Nick. I look forward to following your future success. And after your docuseries comes out, we'll have to maybe circle back around and talk a little bit about it again.
Absolutely. Honored to be with you today, Brandon.
Well, everyone, if this podcast doesn't convince you how important it is that we stop destroying our rainforest like yesterday, I don't know what will. 25% of the world's drugs come from the rainforest. Only 1% or less have been studied for their medicinal value. What a shame if we destroy that other 99% before we even have a chance to discover all the healing potential in this one-of-a-kind place on our planet. If you feel compelled to do something to help preserve the magic of the rainforest, there's a great nonprofit that comes highly recommended by Nick that you can donate to at AmazonWatch.org. Any contribution you make can really make a difference, and tell your friends too. That's once again AmazonWatch.org. Otherwise, remember to subscribe to the Positive Head podcast on iTunes and give us a good review while you're at it. Also, don't forget to check out our new wares at positivehead.com as well. And of course, as I cheesily always like to say before I go, be sure to remember, everyone, as long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Be well, everyone.